These are representatives of the Albanian American Civic League.
An NGO.
Coming from all over, from North Carolina, from New York State, from other areas. It's a nationwide organization.
Yes, in fact, it's international, but it really has the bulk of its board in the United States.
So where are most of the Albanian Americans, where do most of them live? I mean, what parts of the country, where are they concentrated?
Right here in New York, of the 500 to 600,000 we estimate Albanians in America, half of that population is in the metropolitan area, mainly in the five boroughs.
Tri-state area.
Tri-state, yeah.
Before I ask Mr. Ambassador to give us a briefing, and his time is limited, he's going to Washington to meet with Fred Scowcroft very soon. Please give my best. I want you to know that we're very proud of Ambassador Negroponte's leadership. There are we now have 5 ambassadors, and you meet some of the other ambassadors after, but Ambassador Negroponte has brought together a wonderful team, and I have the highest regard for them. And it's reluctant for me to leave this wonderful group because they're doing such a good job and so many experts. But let me point out one thing. Several weeks ago, Ambassador Negroponte was the chairman of the Security Council. They alternate every month. There's a new president of the Security Council. And while there, he was able to coalesce and make a consensus of these diversity of thoughts on supporting our position on Iraq. A unanimous decision by the Security Council, unheard of up to that point, because of the disputes that were going on. And I credit our good ambassador for having done that. And then when he finished his term, he helped to take the whole Security Council to Afghanistan for a 1-week period to see, and that happened just over a month ago.
But so in case you didn't know, Congressman Gilman is leaving his present assignment here at the United States mission to create the John Negroponte Public Relations Society.
I support Diana.
John and
Diana, that's right.
So we've been delighted to have
It's been a wonderful.
Ben and Georgia with us, and I think they both have really gotten into it. I think, you know,
We've enjoyed
I
everything.
think they've enjoyed it. Well, I tell you what, I would love to hear a bit from the group about Albanians and the Albanian American community perspective on things. But let me just say, generally, you know, the Balkans has been one of the big issues for the international community and in the United Nations over the past decade. Now, lately, because of Iraq and in Afghanistan, it's been maybe not as prominent as it was before, but we still, very high on our agenda is the situation in Kosovo, for example, and in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I know those are areas of great interest to the Albanian community. We have the question of Macedonia and what's happening inside of Macedonia and the political stability and the political situation. So I've been on Lake Ohrid. I have pictures of me and my wife. We were just married then, and we have pictures of us having picnics and everything else right along near the shores of Lake Ohrid. But I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe...
Let me just quickly begin, and then my wife, who's the Balkan Affairs Advisor of the Civic League, she's the analyst, the publisher, will then chime in, and then I want you to, if we have time, to hear from the others. First, let me say this, because you talk about Albania and Mr. Nesho. You know him, you respect him, but Albania cannot speak for the 3.5 million Albanians that are outside the country of Albania. And yet, Ambassador, those 3.5 million Albanians are on the border of Albania, in Western Macedonia, southeastern Montenegro, southern Serbia, a place called Prisheva, and Kosova. And the declaration I have to make now is that no one in our group is thinking that there will be a country that will embrace 7 million people without everybody consenting and without everybody adhering to Helsinki principles. If it comes in the future, it will only be that way. It will never be through any armed conflict. and we believe the last armed conflict happened in Kosovo for good reason. We know Mr. Milosevic is in the Hague right now where he belongs. So I just want to make that clear because there's a lot of propaganda against different Albanian groups. Oh, watch them, they want a greater Albania, they want to change border. No. We understand what the future is in Europe. The future is to be integrated, to be united, to be democratic, and to be an economic force to compete with America and China and whatnot.
To survive.
And we believe the Albanians, those 7 million I mentioned, 3.5 million in Albania, and 3.5 million, which used to be part of the state of Albania before the great powers decided to create a state called Yugoslavia just after World War I, and literally drew a line down the Ottoman Empire, Albania, which was declared a free state. And these Albanians, 3.5 million today, ended up in areas where they've never been respected. There's been a hostile racism by Serbs, Montenegrin Slavs, Bulgarian Slavs, and Macedonian Slavs against them. Had they been given their rights of citizenship in those states and allowed to take responsibility for their lives, you would not have these problems today. And this is what's creating the biggest problem of all. And don't forget, Albanians were part of the Roman Empire. They were the Illyrians. They have a Latin alphabet. They were put in countries where the alphabet is Cyrillic. And they were forced to change their ways. I mean, it started with the Turks, 450 years of the worst occupation. Every Albanian in the 15th century before the Turks came was Christian. Now, religion is not an issue with Albania. It's a multi-religious society with this intermarriage. That's not an issue. But think about every Christian, probably a Christian, in 450 years, 2/3 of the Albanian people were forced to change their religion to survive in the Turkish Empire. And today, because they're nominally Muslim, like the Turks, they're being now vilified again. We've got to be careful of these Muslims. God forbid we have a state in the middle of Europe of 14 million Bosnians and Albanians and whatnot. So I just wanted to give you the public relations challenges.
How many Albanians are in today, what is today Albanian territory?
Albania?
Yeah, Albania.
3.5 million.
3.5.
Then 3.5 million outside.
Okay, and outside you have about 1.8 million in Kosova. 95% of the population of Kosova today is Albanian, less than 5% Serb, Turk, and Roma. That number 10 years ago, when Milosevic started the occupation, was 8% Serb. So we know that there are Serbs that should come back to Kosovo, and everybody that I talk to in Kosovo says Serbs will be allowed, let them come back. The problem today in Kosovo is Serbia is interfering with the process in Kosovo. It's not allowing the process to continue the way it should, and one of the great reasons we're here today is that you are in control of that. It's the United Nations which controls Kosovo. It's a protectorate. So anything that the United Nations decides is going to prevail in Kosovo. Our biggest problem with Serbia is that it takes every opportunity to interfere with that process. It started with the occupation of Mitrovica, and today, in violation of your resolution 1244, the Serbs, with the help of the French and the Russians, have created a de facto partition in Kosovo called Mitrovica, where now the northern part of Mitrovica, they took all the Albanian homes, they occupied them, so Albanians have to look across the Ibar River to see their old residences now. There's not a war, there's not conflict, but there's a lot of resentment because the United Nations decided to just look the other way on that. Now, looking the other way on that, they're not looking the other way on what the Serbs want, which is called standards before status. And this has become the new mantra of the international community, and certainly Mr. Civic, who's very effective at what he does. He's adopted many Western ways. It's hard now for the Albanians to deal with the standards before status, although they are willing to do it, because there's 70% unemployment in Kosovo today. The youngest population in Europe today is Albanian. The highest birth rate in Europe today is Albanian. Half the population of Kosovo, 1.8 million, half the population is under 25. And 70% is under 30, as I recall. And the unemployment is 70%. Now, Mr. Nesho's Albania, guess what the unemployment rate is there? 50%. And that's a sovereign state. So it's really economic issues which are really burning a hole in our ability to do things. And that's why Kosovo needs status. Because Nobody wants to lend money to Kosova when they don't know what the final status is going to be. And they got started with something called privatization, embraced by the European community and us. They formed a Kosova Trust Agency called the KTA, and it was just about to be launched. Guess what Belgrade does? Belgrade launches a suit in the United Nations, threatens all the Albanians, that if you go forward with this, we believe we still have title, we will personally come after you. And now even that little hope to keep these people working, because they had taken over all these socially run enterprises, and they would be hotels and whatnot that used to be part of the socialist government of Yugoslavia at that time. Now everybody doesn't know where anything's going, and a suit was filed here. We just explained it to Congressman, my friend.
Lantos,
No, he just came back with it, by the way, from Montenegro. He's not mine too. So the point is, and I want Shirley to comment on that, and then go into the comment during the paper
But be
today.
brief, because
Yeah.
Ambassador.
Let me just
Is that interesting to you? I mean,
It's
with all
very
respect.
interesting, it's very interesting, but I got a question.
Go ahead.
DioGuardi is,
Well, would you believe that name? I just
This
took
one.
20 Albanians to my father's town just outside of Naples. Now, mind you, my father's town, the name is Greci, which means Greek. Why is it called Greci? Because in the year 525, the whole peninsula south of Rome were controlled by Greeks. But the point is, today in Italy, it's incredible. You have several 100,000 people still speaking the old Albanian. They maintain that language. Oh, yeah, a little bit. My father fluently spoke it. But you could write a book on it. But we don't want to go back and see. History is nice, but we're not looking to make the case for the Albanian people based on history. We're looking to make it today based on justice and what's right and peace. And I'd like Shirley to comment on the
Be
privatization.
brief.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
I
I know,
got
after
about 10
that,
minutes.
so I will wait, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
thank you.
we're really, very
She's
very
a good
pleased. Thank you.
historian. Do you have your recent article on
So this is a
Montenegro?
recent article on Montenegro, this is actually my testimony in Congress, but this is not a few weeks ago, but this is not going to be the subject of my remarks right now.
Yeah.
As you know, the UN Security Council will be determining to a great extent the fate of Kosova. Right now, it just so happens that Ben asked me what are the burning issues today. They happen to be all very current, and as you probably know, the United Nations mission in Kosovo has blocked the privatization effort from going forward. It started on October 7th. There's a huge contradiction that the international community and the community can no longer ignore. On the one hand, it says that Kosovo must fulfill certain standards in order to achieve final status or even to discuss it. And yet the question remains, how will they port standards before status is an idea, but specifically focus only on the return of the Serbs who were thrust out of Kosova at the end of the war. The leadership has made clear repeatedly, we will accept the return of
Leadership of the Kosovar community.
yeah, it's a coalition government, as you probably know, there are three parties running it, that non-criminal Serbs will be welcomed back into Kosova. And our position is, and I believe most of Kosova is, that can only happen if Albanians are freed from the fear of being killed again. It's not, the problem, as Belgrade wants to exploit, is not, the critical problem there is not the killing of Serbs by Albanians, because if you look at the figures, by the way, and they're deplorable, of course, but there are more Albanians that have been murdered since the end of the war than Serbs. The problem is the fear of genocide in the Albanian community. And when the Albanian community continues to see that most of the international community bows to the demands of Belgrade, even after Zoran Đinđić was assassinated and the collusion of war criminals, organized crime, and the ruling establishment in Serbia has been well established, then it's very, very difficult for the society as a whole to move forward and focus only on the return of Serbs when none of the conditions are created for anyone to live there now that are adequate, no less, people returning from, exile. And I doubt, by the way, that there'll
Every 4 hours.
be very, very few
5 years
people
later.
returning at the end of the day because it's not necessarily where they want to be. But I'm more concerned than anything about the fact that the international community is not being open about why it opposes self-determination and independence for Kosova, and why it does not allow it to at least achieve economic freedom and
When you say
democracy.
self-determination, do you also mean complete independence, or are you? in your view?
Absolutely, because I don't see how anything else is going to be possible. And wait a minute,
People had
though,
declared that.
if it is going to be something else, I think that there should be honesty about that. The lack of security, the lack of knowledge about what is going to transpire is not only keeping everyone on edge, there can be no development. So if Kosova is going to be thrust back under Serbia, extreme example, there's not a single person in the Balkans who wouldn't tell you that would lead to a renewed conflict, because the Serbian government
What do you think the
is searching
European
for
view
genocide.
of this is?
The European
Think
view,
European
in my
Union
opinion,
wants to
what I
see
believe the
happen?
European Union wants, and which I think is most regrettable, they do not want to take responsibility for their role in 10 years of Balkan wars. So they've worked very hard to create a false parity between the perpetrators and the victims. As a result, they would be perfectly willing to have Kosovo put back into a federation of sorts with the former Yugoslavia. It's a very, in my mind, it's
Who
a
has
view
the
that...
lead responsibility within Europe? Who do you think is the person most paid attention to? Is it out of Brussels? Is it Solana? Or is it one of the countries? Is it France or Germany? Who exercises some leadership on this issue?
That is an incredibly important question that I would give a great amount of money to have the true answer to.
Oh, okay.
Solana has been ruling the effort to push everyone back together. The U.S. government, even the Bush administration, even did not agree with the creation of this new entity called Serbia and Montenegro, which not a person in the world believes will be able to go on. But there's also one thing. There's a very false belief, in my opinion, that Europe thinks that Belgrade is the repository of some future economic development. And nothing could be further from the truth, because the money that was funneled through Belgrade for so many years was a product of the Cold War and our belief that Tito was better than everyone else. So there was a constant leaning towards Belgrade instead of an insistence that they denazify, one, that they end the racist policies that caused them to participate in wars of aggression for 10 years, and that they truly become a democratic state living side by side other democratic neighbors. As long as there's a belief in Europe that, this Belgrade can somehow be, part of a future gold mine, it's hard to say, in my opinion, who's running the show, because Italy may want a piece of it, and France may want a piece in Germany, etc. But as you know, the EU, with 19 member states right now, it's constantly moving policy-wise to the lowest common denominator, because everyone is competing. And it will take the United States, therefore, it will take the United States to take the policy lead
As it did.
in the Balkans.
To solve
It
that
doesn't have to take, well, yeah, but if we don't do it, we've seen the history in Europe.
Well, you'd think that the Europeans could.
Right, but what is the price of not recognizing that? Another war in the Balkans, and if there is, who's going to end up paying for it in the main?
United
The
States.
United States.
Okay.
So the very policies that we're pursuing work against the outcome that the United States professes to want, lasting peace and stability in the Balkans. And
All right.
anything you can do to...
You've reawakened my interest in the Balkans. I've been down in the trenches fighting the Iraq situation.
and that's all the more reason why you don't want a problem here.
No,
And
it's very interesting what you're saying. And
I just came back.
The Albanian.
I was just there with Mayor Bloomberg. Every single Albanian there, if you mention them Europe, they'll say, forget about Europe. We're not with Europe. We want to be with the United States. They have all their hands in one, and all eggs in one basket. They're all saying our only hope for the future is the United States. That's every single Albanian. I haven't heard one Albanian say, oh, we need England, we need this, we need that.
That comes from all the areas where.
That's from every single Albanian area.
Pro-American
They are the most pro-American people you can find in Europe, and that's for sure.
Ambassador,
That's
they
true.
wanted to contribute 3,000 Albanians.
They wanted to send troops,
Iraq,
volunteers.
And they prevented from doing it.
But
And you need
somebody's
those
stopping them. Who's stopping them?
Our State Department.
well-trained troops.
These are people that
on
are
the
ready,
field
willing, and
there.
able to go into Iraq and serve for the United States.
It's nice maybe to have support from the US or whoever it is, but can't count on it forever. Things have to be the internal resilience of the people concerned. I mean, I'm trying to think without even knowing enough about the subject, and I know the discussion about final status and how people are sort of saying, well, standards before status. And it's a kind of way of deferring that
Delaying,
discussion
exactly.
until a future point, although I think now there's sort of a date for a date when we're going to start talking about that. But, if you had a reasonably democratic Serbia, maybe that would make a difference.
But see, that's the belief, and yet nothing's being done to achieve that. So the notion in the international community, oh, we'll democratize Serbia, will wear down Kosova, and by the time a certain date rolls around, everything will be fine. Nothing can be further from the truth unless they're finally going to, in the international community, agree that in the Serbian community, the mythology of victimhood that has justified acts of aggression for 100 years
But
is
if
ended.
in one sentence I could summarize your concern must be that after all that Kosovo's been through in the 1990s, that you're concerned that in the next several years the international community will lose interest and that the situation will erode and that you could be faced with the same situation.
Absolutely, and that's where it's going, renewed genocide.
That is
That's
your
where we're going.
perspective.
That's where it's headed, that's where we see it.
And it's even,
That's where you
it's
think
even
it's
Carl Bildt's perspective, and he wrote a
Right.
brilliant
Wanted to be sure I
editorial.
understood it
Yes.
in one sentence.
And that the United States will then pick up the tab for renewed war, and instead of doing prevention in the form of diplomacy, we continually resort, to coping with severe crises only when they've erupted.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
From Kosovo, and he's a travel, very
I don't
well-known
know.
travel agency.
You live in
Real estate
Kosovo?
developer.
No, I live here in Yonkers
Yeah.
now. I have a Kosovo travel agency, but I lived through good times of Yugoslavia. I represented the Yugoslavian National Tourist Office in New York for 5 years. In 1990, I went back. I was fired because I was Albanian. And then, you know what happened with Albanians all the time. I joined forces with Joe. I came back to the United States, and we have been trying to solve our problems in democratic way until it came to a war, and Albanians were forced to react to what Serbia was doing. Now, this status quo that is now in Kosovo is not helping anybody. It's not helping Serbs, it's not helping Albanians, it's not helping United Nations, it's not helping Europe. Europe doesn't care. They can keep Kosovo as long as it can stay and there is no war there, like that. They don't care that Albanians are poor and unhappy. They don't care if Serbs are poor and unhappy for the same reason here. Now, Serbs are having hopes. That's why they are interfering all the time. The status quo gives them hopes that someday Kosovo is going to go back to Serbia, whatever is formed. Albanians are having hope that someday they're going to be independent, but they see things not moving in that direction, and they are very unhappy. They have no future at this moment. And how can they offer standards for Serbs if they don't have standards or they have no futures for themselves? How? I don't see how they can do it. You cannot settle a problem unless you make people believe in it. You make people part of it. If you don't make Albanians of Kosovo, me and everybody, believe in what we are doing, there will be no solution. We are the majority there. There was only way to settle that problem. Milosevic tried it to destroy all Albanians. Now Albanians are there. They will never, ever accept to become part of Serbia again.
Let me ask you this.
Never.
Just in terms of the intervention in 1999, was it?
99.
March.
I remember 1999. that did save the situation.
It did.
Oh, yeah, sure. It wasn't that.
We
Everyone
wouldn't even
would be
be here
dead.
talking about it.
I believe that.
Well, you know, I don't want to sound just negative about everything. Of course, we have survived. We were on the way to being destroyed as a nation.
But you're
But
not
now-
interested in just
now we want to-
subsistence, I understand.
We want to work.
Yeah, I
I work
understand.
15 hours a day. My Albanians in Kosova, they are ready to work 15 hours a day, but they have no
Only work
opportunity.
15 hours a day?
Only
What
15
do you
hours
do
a
the
day.
other 9
That's
hours?
it. I prepare for
You're a
work.
permanent representative to the United Nations.
It cannot go forever like that. We are sending money, but we cannot keep them forever like that. They don't want to live like on donations and this. They want to create. And we have young people who have no future. They want to have. You can go, you can finish the
Well,
college,
listen.
but what you're going to do after you finish the college?
This is,
But-
to me, a very
Yeah.
meaningful conversation. I really haven't had a chance
Well,
to
thank
sit
you for
down
opening.
with people from
Thank you.
Kosovo, with
Thank you.
Albanians, Albanian Americans. So I gotta thank my friend Ben Gilman here for having made this introduction. You see, it shows also how diplomats ought to spend more time with congressmen, and then they would...
And they're constituents.
That's what I mean. Leads to